Hello and welcome. I'm Oluma Baina. Today I'm joining by PD Lawton, African historian and creator of www.africanagenda.net. She is also South African and now she is living in UK. Thank you very much for joining us, PD, and welcome to Future Africa program.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here once again, and especially on a day like today when we're having such good news from Ethiopia and how your trials and tribulations are coming to an end.
Let me begin with this question, PD. The Biden administration is threatening to ban Ethiopia from AGOA, a trade act. If the Biden administration applied what it is appealing now, what economic impact would it inflict on Ethiopia?
Well, it's as with the sanctions, it's masked economic war. So it's incredibly hypocritical of the West. But we know that the West is so hypocritical in everything it does in terms of African development. They talk about the sustainable development goals, and yet they don't actually implement policies that will achieve them. And these policies, these SDGs are easily achievable. They are achievable, but Western policy can't implement the basics. They are entirely hypocritical in everything that they do. The AGOA agreement, to do that is to target, is not even targeting any politics in Ethiopia. It's simply targeting the people who have the jobs in those factories, because those factories will close down and those families, those mostly women, will lose their jobs and their incomes. So an incredibly detrimental thing to do.
Do you think such economic sanction on Ethiopia from US or particularly Biden administration has directly impact on people who are working in industries and industrial parks?
Yes. How can the Biden administration or the West in general say that they want these sustainable development goals to be achieved, these United Nations SDGs, and then they do something like this? This isn't even a political attack as such. It's an attack on the average family trying to make a living, having a job in one of your industrial parks, which are wonderful. These industrial parks that quite recently your government has managed to build and start operating for manufacturing. This is what needs to be happening in every African country. So to attack it and the Ethiopia's capacity to manufacture is a crazy policy, a very spiteful one, I would say.
Some Western countries, including the Biden administration, often use, economic punishment on countries that dare to resist imperialistic agenda. And the best example is what the Biden administration is applying on Ethiopia. My question is, for how long should the imperialistic will continue to collapse sovereign nations, especially in Africa?
Until we can get them out, until the populations of America and the European countries and Britain can remove this element of the political elite who are dead set on destabilizing as much of the world as they can, of keeping Africa in a situation where it isn't fully industrialized. But we've talked previously about the BBC and CNN and their lies that they've been telling about what's been going on in your country. And I said in the past that in the West, there is an enormous and growing movement of resistance towards our political leaders, because in effect, they really have become plastic. They don't reflect our desires or wishes, and they don't do things for the benefit of their own nations. So we're looking at a Western problem, which is that the people in control of those Western countries are not a reflection of their populations. It's a question of, for Africa, I would say that to use the crisis in your country, which is thankfully coming to an end, but to use it as an opportunity. And all of Africa should be using this as an opportunity to unite and to create a situation, to create some kind of model whereby a legal structure is implemented, whereby if one African country is attacked, that all of Africa can come together and defend it.
What should also Ethiopian do to stop such unjust economic pressure from Biden administration and its allied forces, actually Western allied forces?
A lot of it, I believe, comes down to educating people in America and Europe and Britain as to what is happening in African countries, because the level of ignorance, I believe, particularly in America, is extreme. So that people in the West have no idea of, unless they've traveled to an African country, or even if they have, then maybe they've gone to some holiday resort and it's a bit like, being in a goldfish bowl. But it's going to be a case of educating. So if people in the West, particularly America, can start to learn about African culture, African history, what it means to be an African, the amazing changes that are taking place across the continent as a new paradigm is emerging. And we need to be educated. You need to educate us about what it means to be African. I think that would be an amazing solution.
What you have said now is very important. I think it is related with media role. And if you can also say something about media role, especially African media role.
Well, there needs to be more OBNs. You need to create an OBN empire across Africa. That's a really, really critical issue, is the media. So yeah, ban CNN, ban the BBC. There are plenty of people in Britain who would be cheering that you've banned the BBC. Many of us would like to ban the BBC, but we can't. But to create an African media empire, and it is easier said than done. In South Africa, when former President Jacob Zuma was in power, and he created something called the African ANN7. And this was a fantastic media outlet for South Africa. I would say the very first time that the country has actually had a media that reflected what the population were thinking. And of course, because of the many things Jacob Zuma was trying to do, they unleashed the dogs of war on him, and they took down this fantastic new media outlet. So it's so important for independent media, for media like OBN. You're so lucky with your sovereignty in Ethiopia that you can say things and you can promote things. So much of the world is controlled. You know, you think possibly people think, oh, the West is free speech and blah, blah, blah. In actual fact, there isn't. And particularly at the moment, it is becoming less and less so. So just more OBNs across Africa. I think publishing is another thing that comes into that, and people's access to books, because it's very difficult. I have friends in Kenya, and it's just very difficult to get hold of books. You need publishing houses, as many as possible, that can produce books about African history, African culture, African voices. So this is all very critical.
And I think a lot is also expected from leaders, African leaders. If you, for instance, take my Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, he's been striving to unite the Horn of Africa since he came to power. And what do you say about the role of African leaders in promoting their own fellow citizens and youth?
Like you have, you're very, very lucky. Need more leadership like the Ghanaians have, President Akufo-Addo and others. I'd like to just quote here, there's something that your Foreign Affairs Minister said, His Excellency Radwan Hussein. And he said very recently, just a beautiful thing to say on the border issue between Ethiopia and Sudan. He said, the border we have with Sudan, the difficulty was not just created yesterday, not created today. It is not a problem, it is just an issue. Because Sudan and Ethiopian people have been there for time immemorial. The border issue came when the colonialists came to that area. So all the problems Africa has dates back to colonial footprints. We never had a big fight with Sudan and Ethiopia because Sudan and Ethiopia are one and the same people. And that's coming from your Foreign Affairs Minister. It's a beautiful thing to say, and echoed very recently as well by Professor Mamamuchi, who's a great Pan-Africanist. And he said, we need to end this ethnic colonial apartheid system in Africa. So this whole effort of uniting and recognizing that ethnicity, these wars, these ethnic wars and the ethnic conflicts are primarily echoes from the past, these colonial echoes where the colonial powers, the imperial powers used ethnicity to divide and conquer, divide and rule.
And what should Africans do to end such ill devised economic pressure or sanctions from the global, some Western global powers?
One thing which is essential in terms of sovereignty is the benefication of mineral resources. If you look across Africa and you think, for example, take South Africa, there is such a minuscule level of resource benefication. So if you go from the cocoa, the coffee from Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, the coffee from Kenya, the minerals, DRC, South Africa, the coltan, the cobalt in DRC, the iron ore that gets shipped out and turned into steel and then brought back into the countries. This is the power. This is where they have the power over African economies. So the more you can have benefication of natural resources, the more secure your sovereignty is. And Jacob Zuma tried to implement this. He tried to, in South Africa, because as you know, the resources of that country haven't benefited the population as they should have done. They've benefited a very, very small minority who all happen to be interlinked. So resource benefication is hugely important. And of course, in order to do that, you need energy. So we're looking at what is the most critical thing, what's the most important thing that African countries need in order to secure their sovereignty and in order to uplift the populations out of poverty to afford everyone a dignified standard of living. The most critical thing is electricity, which is what your country recognized in the creation of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So energy and electricity are the key thing. Africa needs energy more than it needs anything. Energy, electricity is the backbone of any economy. So implement the energy, the ability, the capacity to create electricity, and everything else comes from that. But it's so critical, and it's what's lacking. Sub-Saharan Africa has the most acute energy deficit. Hard infrastructure. So, you know, we come back to your question of the Biden administration and the West in general. If you are really a true friend of Africa, as the West, you know, says it is, then the most important thing you could do is to fund hard infrastructure, to fund hydro dams, nuclear power stations, any way at all of producing electricity. Let Africa burn coal. There's such a wealth of coal in South Africa and other countries. Let them burn it in order to produce the electricity and get their populations out of poverty and increase the economies. So that's just more hypocrisy, because all the West wants to do is to have these, you know, the soft infrastructure. It's just soft power games.
What should also be the role of African diaspora in defending their own country? Because, you know, the African diaspora has greater responsibility in defending their own country.
I would like to see, I mean, the diaspora, the Ethiopian diaspora and others have been doing such an amazing effort in standing up in solidarity, that they really have helped to turn the tide on your crisis. Going forward in the future, I would like to see them really being more focused on development. So I would like to see the diaspora using their position to influence Western governments to push for funding of hard infrastructure throughout the continent. One of the most important things is the railway, the Continental Railway Network. Your viewers may be able to see the map on the wall behind me, which is the high-speed railway. So I would like to see the diaspora's role in doing that and pushing for energy projects and standing up for them and pushing for hard infrastructure, and for their role as educators to educate people in the West about things in Africa that Westerners just know nothing of.
I think you have full information about the No More movement. The No More movement is initiated and being implemented by Ethiopian and Ethiopian dissenters, not only Ethiopian, but also African and African dissenters all over the globe. And my question is, what impact do you think this movement will bring on the Biden administration?
The No More movement is to be commended. It's amazing. However, it can't be allowed to lose impetus. So it's very important that it maintains that level of pressure. I think it can only go from strength to strength, but there are always issues, you know, in how much our Western leaders actually listen to people. There are issues there. There are huge problems there, in fact. But that is our role. We have to keep trying.
Finally, if you have any message to my audience, you're welcome, Ms. Pidi.
Thank you so much. You know what I would love to do is I would love to read you something that was written by Kwame Nkrumah. And it's about Africa uniting. Kwame Nkrumah wrote a book way back called Africa Must Unite. So I'm just going to read you this. He said, Africa is one continent, one people, and one nation. The notion that in order to have a nation, it is necessary for there to be a common language, a common territory, and a common culture has failed to stand the test of time or the scrutiny of scientific definition of objective reality. The community of economic life is the major feature within a nation, and it is the economy which holds together the people living in a territory. It is on this basis that the new Africans recognize themselves as potentially one nation, whose dominion is the entire African continent. It is clear that we must find an African solution to our problems, and that this can only be found in African unity. Divided we are weak, united, Africa could become one of the greatest forces for good in the world. I think that's just such a beautiful quote. And if there's anything we can learn from this crisis in Ethiopia, it is the fact that Pan-Africanism must become a more and more powerful force in Africa, and that Africa must unite economically through development projects, such as the African high-speed railway network. This is the perfect moment in time to push for hard infrastructure such as that, which actually unites every single region on the continent. There is no program, no project that has more connectivity connected to it than that high-speed railway. It is so vital. It's so vital that it is built. And the fact that people across the continent, because Africa is vast, the people can connect with each other. One thing I would like to say about the high-speed railway network is the African Union are saying that it's to be completed by the year 2063. That's way into the future. And in fact, most of us, well, you won't, but I certainly will be dead by then. So it's far too long. It's far too long to plan for this program to be finished. This needs to be done within the next 12 years. And I want to just point out something which is really, really, really vital. When Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and Nasser, and your wonderful Haile Selassie were creating the Organization of African Unity in 1963, their vision was to industrialize the economies of every single African country as quickly as possible. Nkrumah was an incredibly impatient man. He didn't have time for projects that would be finished in 20 years' time. He wanted them finished within a week. And that was the beauty of him. His impatience to see Africa standing on an equal footing with the rest of the world. So what the Western political elite did, because of course they didn't want this to happen, and this resulted in a backlash against Nkrumah and Nasser and Sekou Touré. It ended up with a situation where this policy of doing things slowly and giving people time to learn, this was a complete nonsense. And they're trying to do the same thing with the railway by saying that it needs to be implemented by 2063. So that is something to fight against. We don't need 40 years to wait for this to be finished. We want it finished now.
What you have said in your conclusion, referring Kwame Nkrumah's article, seems a proverb that united we stand, divided we fall. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We have to fight for this new paradigm, which is emerging in Africa. That is the reality on the ground. You have to fight for development.
P.D. Lawton, African historian from United Kingdom, thank you very much for your insight and coming back to OBN Horn of Africa. OBN Horn of Africa is actually hereafter, it is your home. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. And may I say Happy Christmas to all your listeners. And we pray for a peaceful and prosperous new year for Ethiopia and all of Africa.
Dear viewers of OBN Horn of Africa, today we've discussed with P.D. Lawton, a South African historian who is living in United Kingdom. And I'm sure you have got some important information or important points from this discussion. Until next edition, goodbye.